All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. Gonna do another uber nerd fantasy chat on book one of the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie called The Blade Itself, which is an awesome grimdark fantasy series about Logen Ninefingers, aka the Bloody Nine, a ruthless assassin who massacres bad guys in berserk mode, and also Glokta, the crippled torturer, which is a fascinating character, and Giselle, the spoiled rich kid prince. And we've also got some other minor killer characters. And it's just a really awesome, grim, dark, all around character driven novel. And I love it. It's because it's definitely grimdark, but very different from Game of Thrones. It's not like grimdark high fantasy. It's very character driven, uh, character driven grimdark fantasy with not as much world building, but more as it progresses. But yeah, obviously, it's a fascinating series and an awesome book. So why don't if you want to go first there, Tristram? What are your general thoughts about the book, and like what's your favorite character if you have one too?
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Well, I would just say that one of the things is I picked up the blade itself, not really knowing fully what I was getting into. I knew it was grimdark, but I just must admit that the book is gripping. It's absolutely gripping. I mean, I love a lot of fantasy authors, and many of them I prefer to even to Joe Abercrombie, but I can't say I've ever read an author who is more gripping than he wrote. The book has an intensity to it, a constant desire to read more, which I think is a fantastic feature. Um, I think the characterization is probably the strongest feature of the book, and that's why maybe choosing a favorite character is difficult. I would say I think West is the most sympathetic, and I think Glokta is the best, like the most interesting, the most intricate. He is when I think of the series, I don't think of Logen. I think of Glokta first personally. He's the defining uh, character for me. However, the character I like the most, the character that I wanted to succeed the most, the character I feel very sympathetic to is the spoiled Giselle. I love Giselle. I think he's class, and obviously he has his own character flaws. And in a different kind of book, he'd be the full-on hero. Um, but I really love that character. Even if he is a bit naive, I maybe I sympathize because I'm a bit naive myself.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, the like I personally, I have a hard time deciding whether I like Logen Ninefingers or Glokta more as characters. I think kind of like you were saying, Glokta is maybe a more interesting character than Logen Ninefingers, but I think Logen Ninefingers is still my favorite just because I have a weakness for awesome badass killer characters.
Yeah, you
So
do.
yeah, and it's interesting too because like Giselle is actually one of my least favorite characters because I just see him as like this stereotypical spoiled rich dude, and and it's almost like to me it almost seems like he's sort of breaking the trope of the noble prince, but then his character gets really like way more interesting in the
In
next two
books.
books too because his ideas about life and like with I guess not going into that many
Yeah,
spoilers yet, but with
leave
all the
that for
stuff
future
that he
chats.
goes through, he
Yeah.
totally it totally changes him, right?
Yeah, and don't you think that's one of the themes of the whole series, or that Joe Abercrombie's theme is that if you go through some bad stuff, well, everyone goes through some bad stuff, but what his point is that actually that's part of what forms you. It's part of
Yeah,
what makes you who you are, regardless of the level of it. The higher the level, it just maybe changes you more. But yeah, opposition is necessary to character formation, and he does that brilliantly with Giselle, but he does it even better, obviously, with Glokta or with Logen.
yeah, yeah. That's what like one of the reasons that one of the obvious reasons that Glokta is such an interesting character is that he's this ruthless torturer, and he's definitely a bad person, but you you almost empathize with him because his narrative, the narrative in his head is constantly that he's in pain and he's struggling to get up steps and shit like that. So I love those juxtapositions of polar opposites like that.
And he was Giselle, right? Once upon a time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And so it's cool to see that, and like to see him looking back at Giselle thinking what he's thinking, and Giselle looking at him being horrified and thinking there's no way. And yet, yeah. So I just think that's very interesting.
Yeah, one of the interesting things too about Glokta is that whenever he gets called into an office by a superior, he's basically thinking that his death is certain. But he's actually performing his duties quite well. But anytime he gets called by a boss to come in, it's like, oh no, what are they going to do to me now? And he's always thinking of ending up in the river or dying in some horrible fashion because he thinks he's screwed up. But he's extremely cynical. He's probably the most cynical character. He has a lot of cynical back talk in his mind, at least. Sometimes that back talk does come out. Towards certain characters.
I was gonna say that too. That's also even more interesting because he's so, like, as you were just describing, he's so kind of paranoid and cynical inside his head, and then he kind of projects this air of arrogance towards other characters. I'm thinking of like a few scenes where he goes or this one particular scene, I forget where he's going exactly, but this guy is asking who he is, and he's like insulted that he's even asking who he is. Like, I'm only crippled inquisitor here, man. Show me some fucking respect, Rich. What's wrong with you?
I think it was a clerk to our collector Salt's office. It was like the secretary or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
The one of the things about Glokta and why he's so freaking amazing as a character is that often one of the tropes, and again, Joe Abercrombie is so wonderful at defying the tropes and yet still making his book satisfying, is that one of the tropes about bad guys is they have to constantly be incompetent in order to allow the story to continue. And one of the things about Glokta that is just amazing is he does the stuff that in other books the bad guy just doesn't do. Like sneak out in the middle of the night, grab the guy in his bed and kill him. Or when you've got him captured, just saying, right, I'm just going to start chopping off your fingers. Tell me when to stop. And you don't see that. That doesn't occur, even though these villains in many books and series are meant to be beyond the pale, like super evil, even demonic, right? Lacking in all human emotion. And they have the hero dead to rights, and they just ask them to break. And then they refuse. They're like, well, I'm going to get someone.
He doesn't seem to enjoy torturing people at all. It's like a job to him.
Yeah.
He's not sadistic.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it's almost like he's really good at his job, even though he doesn't even want to be doing his job. He feels like it's a chore, but he does it anyway. That's really interesting. I didn't really think about that at that level before.
It's a job you can be good at when crippled.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
He can't be a duelist, can he?
No. Yeah, he can't be like Giselle.
No. Because that's what he was once upon a time. But his ability to ride into battle at the lead of a legion is gone. His ability to win the contest is gone. And in many ways, because of the way that cripples are viewed in his society, his ability to be a political leader is gone. But as a member of the Inquisition, where just your brains is what matters and your ruthlessness.
Yeah, definitely. It's like I was just thinking if you wanted to compare it to Song of Ice and Fire again, Glokta is kind of he's kind of like Tyrion in a way, like in the way that Tyrion is sort of held back because he's a dwarf, so people don't take him seriously because he's like 3 feet tall. So, but then because he can't be like a big strong knight or anything like that, he makes up for that with his wits by manipulating people. And it's kind of similar in that way.
It is.
You could
argue that George Martin's like entire books, all of them, are based on that point. Because like one of the things he says to Jon Snow is he's like, all cripples are bastards in their father's eyes. He's like, you don't know what it's like. I'm a bastard. He's like, oh yeah, well actually you don't know what it's like. I'm a cripple. And when you meet Varys, the eunuch, you find out he can't do things because he's a eunuch. And you find out that Daenerys can't do stuff because she's a girl, and Cersei feels hampered, and Bran because of his becoming a cripple, etc. And so or Sam because he's a complete coward and yet not. And so one of the things that Martin shows is that we all have something. Some people's are just larger than others, but I absolutely agree. And Glokta is done flawlessly, but Martin does a very good job in his. So people who like that aspect of Game of Thrones will find Glokta a fascinating character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if anyone's watching this and you haven't read First Law but you like Game of Thrones, you should definitely check out First Law. It's awesome. And we should get to Logen because we haven't talked about him yet.
Well, who's Dusty's favorite character? Because I don't.
Yeah. Sorry, Dusty. We didn't get to you about that.
Logan.
Yeah, I knew it.
Nice. Yeah, he's awesome.
I just like his rugged. The thing is about Logan is, yeah, he's some barbarian from the north, but he's not stupid. He's pretty cunning. I think he's just not used to modern life, and I find his clashes with modern life always hilarious. And like the first time he sees Adjoa, he's kind of set aback at all the people that he sees there, and I think one of the funniest moments in the book is he sees a carpenter making something, and he asks him, "Hey, what are you making there?" And the carpenter's like, "Oh, I'm making some stands." And he's like, "Stands? What are those?" And the carpenter's like, "Well, people sit on these." And he's like, in his mind, he says, "This is gibberish speak." Because it just does not make sense to him. These things called stands, which people sit on. It just does not make sense at all to Logan. I was like, oh man, it's just funny that Joe Abercrombie can just think of these little funny interactions that end up being quite hilarious. But
that's a great thing about Joe Abercrombie. He excels at dark humor, like just with some of the dry humor lines of his characters, and even like some of the simple philosophy that they spout in some of the standalone novels in particular, but all of them, it's really interesting, and that's one of the ways that the characters are really well written, right? And like you were saying, Dusty, it's like one of the reasons that Logan is so interesting is that he's so barbaric, and he's had so much experience in fighting and killing just constantly that he's not a civilized human being. He's like really animalistic in a lot of ways.
Well, if you think of all the encounters he has with violence in the first book, none of these encounters are started by him. Mm-hmm. They're always people aggressing against him, and then eventually they bring out the Bloody Nine towards the end of the book. But Logan does not.
That's definitely
seek
the best part of the
fights.
book.
Yeah, for the most part, he doesn't seek conflict or fights with people. It's like the fights always seek him, and he has to deal with those various things by living, being still alive at the end of the battle. I'm still alive. I'm still alive. And he makes it clear that he's always afraid of things, and I think he has a conversation with Giselle about that. It's like, no, I'm always fearful. And
Yeah.
you kind of see that whenever his internal dialogue, whenever he knows a fight's about to start. He's always sizing the situation up, but it's not a thing where he looks forward to. And we see at times where he picks routes where he can avoid violence. There was one point when he was walking with, I believe, the navigator through a dark alley, and some men accosted him. And instead of, fighting and killing him, he tosses them a purse so that they could leave him alone.
Right.
So he's if he can avoid violence, he seems to do it if possible.
Yeah. He just he's just tired. He's just tired of all this shit, and he just wants to be left alone. He's like so many like classic anti-heroes in that way, right? Like it reminds me of Logan that we were talking about yesterday. He's a classic anti-hero in a similar way too. Like he just doesn't want people to fuck with him, but they keep fucking with him, and then they bring out the monster inside of him.
But like it is interesting because often that isn't the way it's played, is it? Like the best fighter in the series, normally if you mess with them, they destroy you.
Yeah.
And Logan does that, but he is so reluctant to do it because it isn't his objective. It isn't what he wants to do.
Yeah.
And later on when we see him have kind of like a bit of a romance or a stop-start thing later on, you can see that he's like he wishes he could have just some of the more normal things in life. Even though he is, I think, pretty much the greatest combatant in the entire series. At least that's the way he's set up in this book.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Because I think it's in this book, like, because right at the beginning he's with his crew, who, by the way, are amazing. I love the way his crew is introduced. I love how diverse they are. I love everything about the crew. But one of the cool things they find out is that he beat them all at some point.
Yeah.
Like
He
in
fought them all, and they follow him loyally.
Yeah, because he had these sort of like one-on-one duels, and it's so interesting because it's a comparison. That's something that I love about the book is Gisselle's going to fight in something called the Contest. Those who haven't read it, and so like the key point is that's like almost done as a sport. Yeah, it's not meant to actually be dangerous. It's fencing for beauty, for skill.
Yeah.
And like winning that is like a thing of reputation, like winning X Factor or something ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when Logan was fighting in the circle, it was like die or live, and if you die, your entire army is lost. Like it was like huge stakes, very very brutal, no fun at all, lying, cheating. There are no rules. And and so for him to do that with the best fighters that different clans had again and again and again and again and constantly be the winner, I think he says he went in 10 times. It is amazing. It's absolutely astounding, and it's a great comparison between Logan and like how he has lived in this sort of more savage, less civilized world where it's kill or be killed, and Giselle, who's lived this pampered, easy life, and who is, if he wins the contest, is going to be reputed as the greatest fighter in the Union.
Yeah.
And he's like not even a pinch on any of Logan's crew, who could all eat him for breakfast.
Yeah.
Even though he's skillful, and what he does is, I think Logan says it looked more like a dance than a fight. And so I think that's something really interesting. It says a lot about Logan, a lot about him, and a lot about Giselle. And also, of course, the contrast of bias, not bias, of Glokta, because Glokta was a
Mhm.
Giselle, but has now entered a world where he realizes that the real world is actually more like Logan's, and Giselle's is like a haze over our eyes. But obviously, we in our world, we live in what seems to be a very civilized world, right? We don't see any of this Logan stuff. But it's
Mhm.
interesting when you see people brought to a situation where they're thinking they might not be able to get the food they want, or heck, might not even be able to get the political leader they want, or something as trivial as that. And people very quickly can switch. And what Logan suggests is maybe there's a little bit of that in humanity.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, well said, man. Totally. Like that's one thing that you can learn from, like, you can learn it from nonfiction books, and I've learned this from nonfiction books too, but you can learn it a lot from literature, that human nature is not inherently bad or good. It's both, depending on the circumstances, and there's tons of factors that go into everything that happens in that sense.
And that's why choice is the ultimately interesting thing in a book, because any situation can theoretically happen. It's fiction, right? So the author can just say, this happens. The thing that is interesting to the reader is when the character makes choices, because we find that in our own lives. We can't choose to have an easy or a happy life. We can do things that might make that more possible, but we can't actually choose. What we can always choose, though, is how to react to the circumstances given us. And so we love reading that in books, because then we can see those choices and go, oh, I disagree with that, or I would have done this, or, oh, I want him to do this so badly. Please do this. You know, whether it's like kiss that girl now, or whether it's like stab him, don't trust him, or whatever it is. And so we get to live through some of those moments and choices that we would never experience, as we are able to through the method or the medium of literature.
Yeah, you can pretend that you're heroes or anti-heroes or any wide variety of different characters in fiction. That's why it's fun. You can live totally different lives from your own vicariously, which is why it's so great.
And it can build empathy, right?
Yeah.
If you read this book, especially if you haven't yet, anyone who's listening to us, um, like, I think this gives you a genuine insight into how it might feel to have a significant physical disability.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that all physical disabilities are the same or it's trivialized like that, but the insight into how someone might think, who, what is a very easy task for anybody else is suddenly like an Everest for them, is really important, especially for someone like me whose life is very easy. I need to sometimes be reminded of that, and it makes me think and rethink, and I think that's very valuable.
Yeah. I should maybe see if my mom would
Agreed.
read like just certain parts of the book where Glokta describes like how much physical pain he's in, because my mom is physically disabled, and I wonder, like,
Yeah,
based on what I've talked with her about, it sounds kind of genuine to me.
yeah.
Like, it sounds pretty convincing.
Yeah, I believe he did extensive beta reads, Joe Abercrombie,
Oh, good,
for this
good.
purpose. Like, he had it, not if you like sense tested, but like sent it to people who had significant problems, especially with their legs, and had them feedback. How would you describe this feeling? And so, yeah, just read her the 2 pages of him going up the stairs. Just those 2 pages. There's nothing gruesome in that, but my
Yeah,
goodness,
yeah.
it's like
That's
it's
like the best
amazing.
example in the book of
Yeah.
exactly that.
And
Yeah.
it's also a really good example if you're trying to do writing. If any of you are writers, it's a look at and see how an author plays with time, because he can say in the wave of a pen a week passes, and you're like, yeah. And he takes like 2 pages or something just to talk about how Glokta gets up the stairs, and it's amazing how much it makes you feel that oh my goodness, just get up already, and he can't. And oh, like that scene is really good, and it means nothing to the plot, but it means everything to understanding Glokta. Um, amazing work. And again, like, Glokta's a villain in this book, right? He is like an antagonist, and yet scenes like this just make you. I kind of get it. I kind of see why you're this bitter, and that's great writing. That's great writing.
Mm-hmm. That reminds me too, like, about what you said earlier about how it's all about the choices that you make, because he chose to go down this path of being cynical and just deciding to hate life all the time because he has a disability. Like, he could decide to, just try to take it in stride as much as possible, acknowledging that no one's perfect and that you can't just deny reality or anything like that. But
Agreed.
He made so many choices until he went so far down the line that he feels like he doesn't have a choice anymore.
Agreed. It's because it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
It's now become who he is,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what our choices do eventually. Over time, they change us, and it's not about so much what we did; it's about who we have become as a result of those choices. But I mean, Glokta hasn't made the worst choice, right? He could also have just laid down and died,
Yep.
You can, and he's open with that in the book. In one of his reflections, like he considered it. He considered just giving up, just literally allowing himself to die, and he didn't. And that little stubbornness in Glokta, where he's like, "My life's awful. Like I'd probably be better off dead," and then he refuses to actually do it. And I love that about him. I'm like, "Come on, Glokta, you're an evil son of a whatever, but you will not die unless someone actually stabs you in the face." And though he should die, like especially in the next book, I'm like, "Come on, you are outnumbered, outgunned, everything." But Glokta just won't go freaking down. And in the end, like the things that results in pull you to him, and I think make him not my favorite character in the series, definitely not, but the most magnetic. I can't wait to read his chapters. I find them absolutely gripping.
Yeah, he's great. Like I was gonna say, this is like the characters in this. It's not really like good guys and bad guys. It's kind of more like bad guys and worse guys. And Glokta is one of the worst guys, but he's like Joe Abercrombie is the best at writing villains, because he's I guess he's like you said, I guess he's a villain in this, but you can like the best kind of villain is one that you can empathize with.
Yep.
And he does a really good job of that.
He does. Straight up.
Yeah.
Well, I don't even think Glokta is necessarily evil or bad, so to speak.
No?
Well, in the totality of the series, no.
Well, the thing is,
if you think about it, who's he? He's in opposition to, in this first book, he's in opposition to Baez because he's ordered to do so.
Yeah.
But we also see that Glokta will investigate things that his superiors don't like him looking into.
Yeah.
Because he's also not willing to kind of be corrupt like his superiors are. So Glokta is not corrupt like the people he works around, which is a pretty interesting thing, because you would normally think someone in his position would be corrupt as hell, but he isn't. And we see that over and over again when he's kind of analyzing his superiors, like especially the first one, and how when he brings in the stash that he got from that guy, the guy just kind of twiddles his fingers. It's like, "Oh, good job," after berating him the whole time for going after this high-level merchant. So I don't think Glokta's evil. I just think he's surviving. Glokta's a lonely guy. We do see that most of his relationships is completely fizzled once he came back from the war. And he's very jaded about everything. We do see him rekindle his relationship with Colum West. The whole time he thought that he was just kind of forgotten and ignored, but it was his family who had not told him that Colin West had visited a few times, and he was turned away.
Mm-hmm.
But I know a lot of the side characters are super interesting too. Like the crew, Logan's crew, Colin
Logan's
West,
crew are amazing.
and
his sister.
Colin and his trying to navigate the nobility while being lowborn, and all the issues that incur with that. The relationship he has with his sister and their conflict.
Absolutely.
It's a lot of complex stuff going on that's not like your typical fantasy stuff.
Agreed. Because
that's a really good point. Yeah.
Because
go ahead,
West,
Tristram.
Just West played as really sympathetic, right? Okay, so like West is one of the characters that I thought reading the book, I'm like, this is the guy I can like unreservedly. Okay, and then of course at the end of the book, he has West hit his sister. He's really upset. She's been a bit of a prat. She's completely ignored what he's trying to do. She's completely undermined him by seeking out an illicit relationship with Giselle, even though she knows that's expressly not what he wants. But he does strike her, which is, like, as we know, especially in our society, utterly unforgivable, right? It's like, absolutely no. That is domestic abuse. It is a red flag. And Joe is extremely brave to have a character that he's wanting us to kind of side with, engage in this, even if it is like in a certain moment. And he does feel apologetic, and he tries to apologize, and she just shuts him down. She does not accept his apology. She calls him on it, and that's how the audience would feel. Like there's no excuse. But it's interesting that then she opens up this whole thing that they've had abusive parents. And then you think, because that's very realistic. There's a lot of people who have become abusive themselves who actually have been abused. That's actually frequent and common. I do a lot of work. My job in housing, I do a lot of work with safeguarding, and actually, it's incredibly common. So, but the thing is, it doesn't give him a free pass. And again, what it shows is, I mean, Dusty said Glokta is not evil. I don't think anyone in the series is portrayed as just evil, but I don't think anyone in the series is portrayed as good either. I think they're all portrayed.
I think Calder is evil, though.
Yeah, because of what? Because
I think
Calder. You're right. Yeah.
Well, because they sent Forley the Weakest just to kind of warn them about stuff, and they chopped them up and sent them back in a wagon.
Well, but that's their whole
like.
But that could even be the chieftain as well. His, Scale's dad.
The Calder's pretty much an asshole. Like,
he is.
They don't get into Calder in the three books, but in some of the standalones, you get to see more of his personality, and he's an asshole. He's a self-serving asshole.
Okay.
Good stuff. You definitely see that a lot more in the standalones.
Yeah, but he's not a good person.
Well, okay.
At least Bethod, I think, has a mythology there, like
he does.
Mythology to what he's doing.
Correct.
Calder is just straight up an ass. He's not a good person at all.
Yeah, it's just like you say, like Glokta, the Bloody Nine. They're all like some part demon people in this series. They're all pretty bad.
Yeah.
But
then you have like your corrupt officials and stuff like that.
And there's loads of them.
All the people above. Yeah, there's a bunch of them.
If you see any official in the series, but even Glokta, I know you said he's not corrupt, but Glokta bends the rules right, left, and center. But he just doesn't betray his own code within it. Because he tricks and beviles and kidnaps people in the middle of the night, and then chops off their fingers till they tell him whatever he wants to hear, and forces out false confessions under orders, of course. And I would
Yeah.
say it's not like there's good people and bad people. I would say it's not like there's corrupt people and not corrupt people. There's corrupt people and more corrupt people. So Glokta's corrupt,
Mhm.
but he's just nowhere near as corrupt as everybody else in the Inquisition. He's just
But I
the
don't know if
best.
those confessions are as false as we think they are, because we know that a lot of those people that were confessing were actually getting killed off.
Well,
So they had to have known something, you know.
oh my goodness! I think that's the last argument of Kings, isn't it? No, but like
No,
the
even
point
in the
is-
first book, there's
No,
a
what
big
I'm saying
list
is-
of people that die because they're
what I'm saying is
being
that's the argument.
investigated.
If you're getting investigated, you
true.
must be guilty. Can you imagine if the American police force could use that as their argument? Well, as we're investigating you, you must be guilty. So when we beat you, and then you have to admit to something, then you see we were right all along. But no, they can't go that way because they're held to account, and so you have a
Well, I'm not
different
saying they're
kind of.
guilty, but the people that were on the list were
We're all
killed
corrupt
by the people being investigated.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
like so he had a list of people that he needed to talk to, and then when he
Yeah.
went to go talk to them, they were all dead.
Yeah. There's a
And
lot
that
of corrupt
wasn't,
people in this book. That wasn't him.
Yeah, that's for sure. No,
No,
he was
fair
just
point.
he was just investigating and following up.
Yeah. He is oddly, despite the fact that he is a cold stone torturer, he is oddly less corrupt than almost everyone else.
Yeah.
I know he tries to scare them to confess, but
he doesn't just try.
Some of them just
He
hold
succeeds.
out.
And some of them hold out
he
until he
scares
starts
some of them
cutting the
into
tips off their
confession.
fingers. Like
Yeah.
he gets out a cleaver and chops the end of her fingers off. Like he's like, because he's trying to stick up. He's like, he won't really do it, and then he does it. And he's like, oh, now how much more of this do you want to lose? And they're like literally just chopping up the hand. Here we go. And he's like, the key is to do it. The key is to do it a small bit at a time, so that they can confess quickly and still get most of their hand. And it's like, you are cold.
I have
bro.
a question for you guys.
Yeah,
Did
go.
you guys listen to the audiobooks for this?
No.
Yeah, I did.
No, sadly not.
Okay.
I don't pay for audiobooks. Were they good?
What I'm saying
read
is the guy that plays Glokta is fucking amazing.
He
in
is,
the
yeah,
books.
definitely.
He puts him across really well.
Super well.
Yes. Like he even goes into a character where the narrator knows that Glokta is missing teeth. So when he's speaking, you can tell that he's speaking with some type of impediment that happened. Like it's kind of sort of like a lisp. And he plays Glokta so well. It's
super fucking well. Yeah.
Like if you haven't listened to any of those audiobooks, if you have a local library that might have them, or
They're on
they might be
YouTube.
floating around on YouTube.
The first one's on
say
YouTube.
take a listen to any of the Glokta chapters, and you'll be amazed.
Just for the experience.
Yeah.
Just for the experience of hearing him read.
Yeah.
Wow, cool. That's
Because the guy that reads the audiobooks, he gets super into sound effects. So
yeah,
he any type of sound effect that happens, he gets like very into it. Like if someone gets punched in the stomach, it's like, oh! So he gets really into it. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
And of course he gets into the sound effects revolving coitus, so there's those sound effects as well.
Of course. Wouldn't want to miss out on that. Wouldn't want to miss out on that. Thank goodness for R.D. West.
But they're usually pretty funny though.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
So where did you want to go with this now, Andrew?
Well, I don't know. I guess actually we didn't talk about those the secondary characters that much yet. Like
like Baez, maybe.
Yeah, like all of them, and like
is he secondary?
Yeah.
No, he's pretty big character.
He's a major character. I think he's in the whole thing.
No, he's not a
pretty much.
POV character, but he's very important.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's very important to the story.
So sticking specifically
but
to
I
this
find
book,
it funny.
to this
What?
book only.
Yeah.
Well, there's the funny thing is their reluctance to believe who he is, and that huge conflict revolving around that. It's so funny when Glokta's just going to investigate with these scholars, and he's finding out all this information, and it takes a while. And it's almost, even when Glokta gets taken into the house of the Maker, he's still reluctant to believe that Baez is who he says he is.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's amazing, isn't it? Where they're like, "We'll get him. We'll prove he can't be because he'd have the key to the house of the Maker." And that's like a little bit like saying, you know, he'll have the Holy Grail, or you know, like Excalibur, and then just saying to someone, "You can't be Merlin. You'd have Excalibur," and then he literally pulls out the sword of invincibility. You're like, "Oh." Like, my entire world is gone. Like, King Arthur was the real deal. Dang it. Like, screw this. I'm going Magic Land. No, and like, that's what, like, they don't really think that's going to happen, right? They don't believe in magic and all this jazz. Like, oh, that's all made up. Old mythology. Like we might think of King Arthur and Merlin.
They don't even believe in the Shankar.
No.
Because I remember when they were in the House of the Maker.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Northmen. They're in the House of the Maker, and Logen smells the smell, and he says, "Oh, it smells like flatheads in here." And then Baez explains that they were created by the Maker to wage war. Yeah, and then Glokta's like, "Yeah, no, it was Giselle who was like, there's no such thing as Shankar." And then Logen gets very pissed off. He's like, "Yeah, they killed my family. They killed my friends. They're all over the damn north. Don't tell me they don't exist."
I killed a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, so he gives Giselle a quick lesson there.
It's
it almost seems like he was going to punch him in the face.
Yeah, and if he had, Giselle wouldn't have got up. And it's a little bit, doesn't that remind you of Wheel of Time? Where the Borderlanders are like literally fighting Trollocs on a regular basis, and in the South it's like, Trollocs, that's made up rubbish from those northern and you're like,
yeah,
nope. And same with Game of Thrones, right? Like the Wall.
Yeah, the Whites.
The Whites, and there's the Walkers, and everyone's like, down south, they're like, nah, don't talk rubbish. We don't really need those stupid guys in black. Nothing going on up there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There very much is. So what I'm saying is that is a trope, but it's, again, handled very well. And given that concept of Logan's rough around the edges and he doesn't know what stands are and doesn't know how to navigate politics or a big city, but he actually knows more of the truth, the unveiled truth, than Giselle will, even though Giselle has been brought up in a educated society and has had access to things that Logan never has.
Yeah.
Logan's smarter by real life.
Yeah, that's a really great contrast between Giselle and Logan in the book too. That he's, like you were saying, he's this educated upper class guy, but the people who live in that class of society, they don't really experience the real world in the way that people like Logen Ninefingers do.
No.
Because he's out living in the real world because he has to. Excuse me, because he doesn't have a choice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
as I remember, there was an interesting part of the book where Logan is at some type of dinner with a bunch of nobles, and he's like starts eating, and he doesn't know what to eat, so he eats like the garnish, which is like some flowers or something. But anyway, there's a point where I think Colin West starts a conversation with Logan about, because Colin, of course, is familiar with the North. He's from England, and he starts a conversation with Logan. Logan admits to knowing Bethod, and they have a conversation about battle tactics.
Yes.
And we see that Logan is quite adept at battle tactics. And Colin West was like extremely impressed with him. And I think at that point too, Logan says basically that's the most can remember ever saying in a conversation, since he's a man of few words. But he has pages of conversation about tactics and what to do if Bethod is encountered in battle.
And that's, again, it's that whole lived experience, isn't it? Like, he hasn't gone to their version of West Point or anything like that, but he's lived it. He's been and seen Bethod leading, and I can't remember who says it. It might be the Dogman, it might be Logan, it might be Three Trees, but one of them at one point says that Bethod is like the greatest war leader the North has had in generations. Like, not fighter, not individual fighter, but war leader. And so the thing is that Logan was with him for years, right, for the whole campaigns. And so Logan was able to see what he did again and again, and saw how it paid off here and there, and when he chose the contest of champions and when he didn't. And Bethod's got where he has, not by sort of individually challenging and defeating his enemies. He's done it through war. And it's amazing. One of the things I'd love to know, and still don't, is obviously we find out that Logan and Bethod had a falling out in this book. We know that he was very loyal to him, and then he wasn't, and that at one point they were all imprisoned in one of Bethod's cities, and then he let them go into exile. So he could have killed them all. They're a seriously dangerous crew. Every single one of them are like dangerous, and he lets them go into exile. And in the trilogy, at least, this is never explained. Maybe it's explained in other books, but it's never explained in the trilogy. I think that's a very interesting move.
Yeah, I can't say it's explained in the standalones either.
Okay.
But
it's
I haven't
fine.
read everything.
It's fine if it's not
I
explained.
haven't read everything though. There's like 2 books in the world of First Law that I have not read yet, so I don't know
me neither.
if they get into it or not.
And maybe they will. But my point is, for this trilogy, the thing is, it's a cool thing to think about. The Bethod is crafty. He's strategic. He's not just a savage Northman. And when the Union think, oh, we'll go up if we have to, and we'll sort him out, and they don't really understand how serious an issue it is if the North actually unite under a competent leader. And at this point in book 1, they don't really grasp how seriously big a problem that would be. We do, because we're listening to Logan, and we know about the confrontation when Bethod comes and tries to push Baez around at the beginning. And he's like, join me. And Baez is like, I don't think I will. And then Baez goes to the Union. And you see at this point, in book 1, Baez looks like the Gandalf character. Right?
That's a good point, yeah.
He really does. He's gone and got the lost hero, the Aragorn, if you will. If only Logan was Aragorn. He's so not. But he gets him and takes him to the place where Giselle looks like the perfect young hero, doesn't he? It's like, and you'll get him. And I was seeing this whole thing where Logan trains him up, and then he becomes the new guy and all this jazz. I was ready for it. That's the story I thought I was getting. And I was sold on Baez's whole thing. He's clever. He's a bit sarcastic. He's very likable, and occasionally just blows people up. And all of that is delightful, right? When really arrogant people just get it what's coming to them, and Baez is often the guy who delivers it. And at one point, Logan bets against him in the fight, in the contest, and is it Quill? Oh, his apprentice,
Malachus Quai.
He gives, I think, maybe the most important line of his, from my point of view, most memorable, is like, never bet against a magus, or magus, depending on how you pronounce it. And the point is that the Baez cheats to win the bet. and he can cheat in a way that no one else can detect, no one else can prove, because he uses the high art. And so he wins the bet. And Logan's disgusted because he's like, blah, 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 not fair, blah, 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 blah. But it doesn't matter because he still won. And that is a clue to the way that Baez is as a person, that he will use methods that other people can't even imagine, and he is always ahead. And if you bet against him, you will always lose. And
Baez is always 10 steps ahead.
Yeah. And that's what we realize in this series, because it seems at the beginning like, whoo, he's betting against the guy with the big army, and he's just this old guy out on a road on his own. He like has one follower. You're like, if you were like the big wizard, like, why are you like not like in a better spot than this? And he goes back. Logan doesn't really respect him, but comes along anyway. Giselle thinks he's a joke, but comes along anyway. No one thinks he is who he says he is. When he claims his spot on the council, I love that whole scene. I just think it's hilarious. It's like, by the way, this is my chair. You're not that guy. It's like, oh no, I am that guy. And then they try and disprove it. And he's like, oh, you mean this key? And just like moment after moment, he's just like smack, smack, smack. And it's just verbal riposte. Anyone who thinks they're his intellectual equal, he just mocks. And you're just like, wow, that's such a likable character. You like totally get into it. And so Baez is a brilliant secondary character, and it's very good.
Yeah, one of the funny things too is everyone is asking him to prove that he's a magician, and he's refused almost every time, except when he destroys Archlector Solt's chair when he's sitting in it, just to prove a point. But he doesn't perform magic on command. Except for that one instance, but that wasn't really on command. That was just to humiliate the Archlector. But the guy is definitely powerful.
He is, and but the magic, just anyone again listening who hasn't read the series, the magic in this series is powerful, but it's not cheap. Yeah, you won't see people just flinging fireballs around. Baez is like one of the greatest of all wizards, and when he uses his art, he is visibly and clearly exhausted and damaged. Like, so he couldn't just like blow up armies. No way. And that's, but also again, this is a more mystical magic system. It's a magic system where you're never exactly sure what it can do. No, but that's a good thing in this system, because it's magic low. Sorry, Dusty, what were you saying?
No, it's a very
soft magic system.
Soft magic system, yeah.
But I'm saying that as a good thing, because it plays with all the strengths of soft magic, as in, I'm a little bit scared.
And one of the aspects of grimdark to me is that it's more realistic. So it's more realistic for people saying, hey, bro, there's all this magic stuff, to just actually be full of shit.
And they think he is, right? They think he is. And like, just let's just briefly. We were talking about secondary characters. We'll get back to Logan at another point. But what other secondary characters did you want to discuss?
We forgot about the slave girl.
We didn't forget.
She plays a pretty major role in this trilogy.
A huge
role.
But
if we were going to call a character a barbarian, she kind of fits the role of barbarian. She, like, violence is like her first reaction to anything. She's like the complete opposite of Logan when it comes to that regard. Extremely twitchy, extremely violent, and deadly. She's a great combat partner for Logan that we see at the end of the book. And they save each other's asses. Oh yeah,
that scene needs its own little bit of discussion. But yeah, Pharaoh is brutal, isn't she? She's brutal. She's been hardened by life. She's been a slave. she's been on the run. She's had to murder people, and she is been hardened like a spearhead burned in fire. She's like, and like she is as Dusty said, shown to be one of the greatest fighters in the series.
So yeah, she's extremely quick and aggressive. I know when she's traveling with the one wizard, he has a lot of trouble taming her wild side, because the first thing she wants to do is just kill people.
All the time.
Her entire motivation is vengeance.
Yeah.
That's what keeps her interested in Tobias's goals, because he's offering her something, vengeance against the Gurkish Empire.
Yep.
But yeah, she's a really interesting character, and I like that they have such contrasts. Like, we have these two badass fighters, but one of them doesn't really like to fight, and the other one just wants to fight at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
And I think there was a point where she punched Baez in the face, right? And then Baez just started laughing afterwards. It's like, oh yes, you're very feisty, or something like that.
Yeah, that's true.
I think, like you said, the key thing is it's her first reaction, isn't it? Like, here's someone who won't listen to us. Let's kill him. Here's someone who lied to us. Let's kill him. Here's someone who won't sell us a boat. Let's kill him. These people look suspicious. Let's kill them. Whereas Logan, as you said, in that one point, he's getting mugged, and he's like, hey, just take this money and go away.
Take it, man. Leave me alone.
I don't want to have to kill you.
Yeah.
We know he's capable of doing it. He just doesn't want to.
But one of the things we should just touch on is Baez assembles a group. Like, actually, that's the purpose of this book in a way, is let's assemble the team, right? Mm-hmm. And in this group,
make the fellowship.
Yeah. Well, like, yeah, the Joe Abercrombie fellowship. I think it should be called whatever the opposite of a fellowship is, like the anger ship or something.
The enemy
dark
ship. Legacy or something like that.
I don't know, but he gets Giselle on board, who I again at this point thought was kind of going to be the main character, and I thought the point was going to be he was going to be humbled and hardened, like upskilled by Logan, humbled by Baez, and become the true. And it seemed it was all about him. At least I thought so.
And then he'll fix the world.
Maybe. Yay. But like, I thought West would go with him. When I realized West was off to war, I thought Giselle won't go. They'll get him. And they did. So you've got the rich boy who's the paragon. And then you've got Pharaoh, who's like come from the south. She hates the Gurkish. Guess who else hates the Gurkish? Glokta. Guess who else hates the Gurkish? Everybody is the answer. Even most of the Gurkish hate the Gurkish leadership. They're really they're like the amalgus bad. But he also gets like Longfoot, who's a really secondary character. But I love Longfoot. He's just he's arrogant and thinks a lot of himself. And he's just a navigator, and I just think that's hilarious. But it's so sensible to have him along. And then like you've got Logan, who can just kick everyone's trash, right? And then Baez, who is like the wizard, and Baez's apprentice. And I kept wondering, like, why is this apprentice along? He's just a waste of space on this journey. He isn't advancing the plot. His only job was like get Logan. But obviously he's changed in the book. He starts off a bit funny and jabbery, like an annoying clerk or something, and then he just whistles away into almost doing nothing in the later ends of the book. He becomes very quiet and withdrawn, or just not important as a character. And so it's interesting that this crew that he's assembled is primarily Pharaoh, Logan, Giselle, and Baez. And so it's interesting that kind of crew is very different from something like, for example, like the Fellowship, where you've got, people who are iconic characters who aren't going to change too much, and they're set, and they're very sympathetic. The Fellowship. These guys are just not. Giselle's arrogant. Logan's a killer trying to avoid doing anything, only doing this because he kind of has nowhere else to go. Pharaoh doing this only because she believes it's going to allow her to kill more people of the kind of people she wants to kill instead of just random people. And Baez, we're just never sure. And that's why it's good that his magic is so uncertain. Like, could Baez just solve this all by himself? Like, we always get that feeling that maybe Gandalf could. But he seems to need people. How much of what he's doing is a magician's tricks? Like in our world, like it's all like trickery. Like, is he pretending to more power than he actually has? And he really needs these guys to sort the problem. And you never know. And that's really cool. I find that quite exciting. And it's a puzzle I wanted an answer to quite strongly. And it's one of the things that gets me to open up the second book. What is this team going to do now? But just like with every good fireworks show, just before the show goes off, you need to light the fire. And I think that's what the final scene in this book does.
Oh man, that final scene. Do you want to talk about that?
I love it. Berserk mode.
Well, what do you think of that scene,
Nine.
Andrew?
He becomes the Bloody Nine. That's the best scene in the book to me. You finally see the Bloody Nine, and he fucking massacres the shit out of tons of people with the giant sword and doesn't even notice when he gets hurt until after he's no longer the Bloody Nine and he goes out of Berserk mode.
Yeah.
Well, the crazy thing about the sword is it's not even like a sharpened sword. It was just kind of like a showpiece on a wall.
Yeah, he was like bashing people with it. Yeah.
Yeah, he's destroying people with this like showpiece sword that's not really meant for combat.
Yeah, yeah.
And the thing is, once again, he's trapped into it. So the way this scene starts is that while they're meant to be assembling to go on the boat, and he goes to find Pharaoh, who's snuck off because she just doesn't listen to anybody ever, because she doesn't trust anybody ever. Even Yalway, who's been nothing but great to her the entire time and is incredibly patient and he's just amazing, saves her butt a bunch of times and she still suspects him. But I mean, I understand that. I don't think that's unrealistic. But anyway, so she's gone off, and while she's off, the inquisitors try and take her in. And so she's like trapped.
Well, these aren't Glokta's people, though.
No,
so
the Inquisition, not Glokta.
Yeah.
But they try and take her in, and so she's trapped. Logen goes, and it's like a rescue. But then it becomes like an ongoing running fight, and like they go over all sorts of places, like trying to get to the boat, but be like multiple people trying to stop them, and it's exciting. I think if this was on film, this part of the scene would just be so frenetic and pacey. You really get that impression from the writing. And it shows that they're like, Logan's desperate not to fight, but he just has to, or die, or leave her to die. And he refuses to do so, which is one of the things where we see that Logan, despite what he says about himself being like, I don't care, he does care. He does care. And
most of that fight scene, like from the start of it, he's fleeing most of the time.
Trying to not fight.
Yeah, it's when he gets cornered, that's when shit hits the fan for everybody else.
Yeah,
like, you
they
do not
beat
want
him
to corner Logan.
No.
They beat on him. Like, he's taken down by a group of them, and they're beating on him. And if they would have just left him alone.
He becomes the Bloody Nine when he gets really fucking hurt. When he gets beat up, that's when he turns into fucking savage berserk mode.
So, question then, and he does go Bloody Nine, and then everyone just dies. And he doesn't feel pain, and as this continues. And we've noticed, by the way, that Pharaoh shows some of those characteristics. That she doesn't get tired, heals very quickly, kills without remorse. And we know something about Pharaoh because she's colorblind. We find out in this book that she is what they call demon-blooded, right?
Right, yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons that she's special and can do what she does. And so it suggests, has Logan got a little bit of that? And Logan seems to... Now, this is why I want to ask you, both of you. I'd be really interested in your opinions, because I believe this is still ultimately an unanswered question, is what exactly is the Bloody Nine? I've heard it said that it might be that it's just his berserk mode, that it's like just when he goes and loses his rag and just can't remember anything, he calls it that. I've heard some people suggest maybe it's kind of a split personality. I've also heard people go down that it's a demon. Like he is in some way occupied by a demon called the Bloody Nine, who sometimes comes out, and when it is, it does what it wants to do. Most of the time, he has it locked up and just carries it with him. But Logen is in control. What is your view, having read the books? What is your theory about the Bloody Nine? Or do you have a completely different one?
That's interesting. You know, I kind of remain fairly ambiguous about it, I would say. I think, like you said, it doesn't really get fully spelled out, and
No.
in the standalone novels that I've read, it doesn't really get spelled out either. Maybe it does in the newer books that I haven't read yet, but it doesn't. I think I like when things like that, when authors do things like that, so you can go through a whole bunch of those different interpretations, and you could read any of those into the book, and they would work.
Yep.
Which is what I really like about it. But yeah, I think any of those are possible, really, or it could be like a combination of any of them.
What do you think, Dusty? What do you think the Bloody Nine is?
Well, Logen is a survivor, and it seems at the end of every fight, even if the Bloody Nine has nothing to do with it, he's always speaking about how he's still alive. I think when the Bloody Nine is basically when his survival instinct has taken completely over, and I think that's what it is. I don't think it's anything to do with demons or magic or
you see, I do.
Anything.
You do?
Yeah, I just think it has. I think it's just maybe a dissociative personality disorder.
Cool.
He just because he doesn't really. He's not conscious of what he does.
Again.
Because I know in the other books where something happens where he accidentally kills some people. He doesn't even know that he did it.
Sorry, Brett Dusty. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just saying, like, I don't think it's anything demon related or magical.
Okay.
I don't know. Does he heal? He can withstand a lot of pain.
He can.
It's like the it's like the pain in his nerves just aren't sending signals to his brain.
Fight about it.
No.
Yeah, I don't know.
I could totally. I think it's ambiguous enough to be either. But my personal theory is the Bloody Nine is a demon. I think in one of the moments when he was gonna die, I think he made a deal, an actual deal, and that the demon shares him as a host. But most of the time, he's in control. Whenever he loses that control, the demon takes over. And when the demon's in charge, that's why he can't remember it. That's why he has all the powers of a demon-blooded when the demon is in control. And that's why they can't take him down. They can't stop him. They can't fight him. They can't hurt him. And he can just kill people with a lump of wood when he's the Bloody Nine. And I actually think that he's named that demon the Bloody Nine. It's probably got a name far beyond that, something demonic. But we know that demons are a real thing in this world. We know that, and we know that things like eaters are using a demonic energy, right? Like straight up. And we know that Euz, whoever was the original of the wizardy guys, the demon killing guy, we know he was half demon for sure, spelled out. And we know, for example, that Pharaoh has demon blood in it. And when he goes Bloody Nine mode, he has a lot of attributes that look a lot like what happens with Pharaoh. That's why I think it. But I would not be disappointed. I would not be disappointed at all if it's just his berserk mode. But again, maybe I just want to see more magic because that's the kind of guy I am. I love magic, and I think it could be. I would not be disappointed if he never reveals it. If he
I think you do have a good point.
I agree.
Especially since Logen can speak to spirits, so maybe he does have some affinity with magic.
There's something going on with him. There's something going on. But it would be cool. No matter what it is, I'm going to enjoy finding out. That's what Joe Abercrombie's done to me. He's made me love everything he writes. So whatever his answer is, I won't be disappointed. I'll be just like, oh, it was this. How cool is that?
Yeah,
And
me too. Me
I
too.
love the mysteries he leaves us. And just anyway, so when he just butchers everybody, you think, well, that's the big reveal, right? That's it. That's the end. That's the climax. And they get back to the book,
Yes.
and they're like, we've made it. And I'm like, we've made it, because it's only like a few pages to the end of the book, right? So in my head, Joe Abercrombie's fooled me into thinking it's all over now. And I just relaxed, and then those extra couple of practicals burst in, and they're like, Logan's come out of his bloody 9 stage and is wrecked. He's exhausted. Pharaoh's like knackered. Everyone's down like, oh, wow, what's he going to do here? And then, well, the way it's described is just, I can't even do it justice. But like,
Well, Baez is naked,
Yeah.
right? He
Yeah.
comes out of the bathtub without any garments on, just like stark naked.
Oh,
He's
As
like,
you
what's
would be,
going on here? He's, what's going on here?
and
I think his hands are like on his hips or something.
of course they are. But and they're just like, this is a slightly fat old wet man, you know.
Yeah.
If you think you're going to embarrass us into not doing this, you're wrong. We work for the freaking Inquisition.
Yeah.
And they're going to move in, and he just like, nope.
Yeah, the first guy gets turned into an
Pink mist.
exploding hamburger bomb, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it just like that I can't even do it justice. I wish I could. That it's like hamburger bomb. That sounds pretty crazy. But it's like, he isn't like stabbed. He doesn't like shoot a beam of light through him. He just literally, he does to him what he did to the chair. He's just not there anymore.
Yeah, he just made him blow up into bits.
And you're like,
and then we didn't talk about his first use of magic, where he torched a bunch of people to ashes.
Yeah, it's true.
When Bethod's men were sent after him, and that was a pretty crazy display.
And he's exhausted afterwards, though, isn't he?
Yeah, he was extremely exhausted afterwards.
His apprentice has to like basically tend to him.
Yeah, so it's not something that could be used wantonly. It's something he seems to only use in dire situations.
Yeah,
but he also explains too. I like when they go into the histories of things. So he himself is like, his master had full mastery over all magics, and he is only able to master just a very small portion of that in his specialization, which is not healing. It's the opposite of healing.
It's the blowy up bit of magic.
Yeah.
But
so
and that's part of his justification for why they need to go and get the seed. Because he tells them that's what they're going to do, right? He's like, we're going to get this boat and go after the seed. And we don't understand all that the seed entails, but we know that there's only one other wizard who's like doing what Baez wants as the Grand. All the rest seem to have turned their backs on him, and there's not many of them left. But Yahweh, the guy who brought Pharaoh, he actually has like, not an argument with him, but he's like, are you sure, kind of thing? Like, this seems really, really dangerous. And Baez is like, no, we need this. It's the only way that we're going to be able to do it. And so it makes you think that like getting the seed is like the MacGuffin, right? It's like the one ring, or at least that's how they portray it. And I should have known by now that Joe Abercrombie was going to flip a few things on me because of how anti-trope he is. But yeah, just interesting.
Yeah, definitely, man. Yeah,
this series, they definitely a trope flipping series, you know.
Yeah, that's true.
It's really hard to expect what's going to happen. I know we've all read it, but by the end of the third book, we're like, wow, this is not what I expected at all.
I was going to say, right? did any of you call the end of the third book before it happened?
Definitely not. No.
All right. Good. I was just going to say, because if you had, I'd feel a little bit smaller as a person, because I was utterly bamboozled bamboozled by it. But afterwards, like, I didn't think, well, that was a fake ending. Not at all. I was just like absolutely stunned. And but this first book, you might be thinking, hang on a minute, did you just say that this entire first book that you've just been raving about is old man gets hero, gets other hero, gets girl hero, and gets on a boat? Is that literally what that happened in this book?
Well,
And
there's lots of fighting. There are
yeah,
lots
and
of killing and lots of fighting too.
And like there's like a bit of a underdog sports story going on, and there's a little bit of a like I'm a cripple and I hate everybody going on. But in the end, plot wise, that's pretty much what happens. At the end, they're like, yep, we're gonna have a war, the Union versus Bethod, and we're gonna go on a boat and get something like Voyage of the Dawn Treader time, people, except really not C.S. Lewis. But like,
there's a lot of little subplots that happen throughout the book.
Yeah.
But that main plot is them. And we don't even know what that is, the main plot, until it actually happens. Because we don't know what Baez is planning. We only know it's like, oh, there's these 3 people that are coming together now. Like, we didn't know Giselle was going to be thrown into the mix. We didn't know was going to be thrown into the mix. We didn't know that. Well, we knew that he was traveling with Logen, but we didn't know that they were going to have to meet up with these other 2. I guess we kind of had a sense that Pharaoh was, because she was with another wizard.
Yeah, and again,
they were hinting at it.
Yeah, book sense. Like, there's nothing in the book to tell you that, but the fact that Pharaoh's a major character, Logan's a major character, and Giselle's a major character, and you get POVs from all of them, I'm like, yep, they're going to team up. But
you get POVs from Glokta.
And I thought Glokta was going to be on the boat.
Really?
I was positive Glokta was going to be on the boat. I thought, these are the 4 different people. Baez is going to get them all in. They're all going to agree. And I thought it was going to be that, like, the Archlector was going to try and kill Glokta. Because one of the subplots is Glokta's investigating the Mercer's Guild and, like, kidnapping and persecuting people to find out the truth. And there is loads of corruption there. So in the end, he discovers it. And there's like political machinations is one that he's trying to undercut the Grand Justicar. So it's like the Inquisition against the court system. And all this is happening, but it's actually, compared to what Baez is doing, it's window dressing. And so I thought,
because Glokta got a promotion, so he's not going to go on with Baez, because Baez is an antagonist to the Inquisition.
Yeah, they hate him. They're trying to get rid of him from like the moment he arrives in town. But I actually thought Glokta wouldn't be getting promoted. I thought Glokta would be like on the run. That's what I thought was going to happen. And then he'd be jumping on the boat with Baez to get away from the Inquisition, who would be trying to kill him at that point. And Glokta thought that was going to happen. So when Glokta thought it was going to happen, I thought it was going to happen. And then, of course, instead of getting like lynched and exiled, they promote him. Of course, it's the worst promotion ever because of where he's sent. But isn't that Abercrombie all over to just reverse our expectations again?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would have been gobsmacked if Giselle or West hadn't ended up on the journey. They spent too much time with them for them to just be ignored.
Yeah, well, they get their own paths through the story. It's just their paths are very different, because I know West ends up being the lens of the War of the North versus the South, and he becomes kind of like a tragic character in the end.
Well, we'll have to save that for the books.
Yeah,
I'm not going to say what happens, but he's kind of like the centering personality when it comes to the war. Like, we have, of course, the noble view of the war. Yeah, the Dogman's also a centering force.
Because he shows
in the North.
The North, yeah.
Well, Red 3 Trees for book 1 and 2, I would say.
Yeah. Fair enough.
He's kind of, he's kind of like the dude.
He is the dude. I love him. I love how he takes a moment.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he takes his time. He's definitely the oldest and wisest of Logan's crew. I think he's older than Logan, right? Because he's
He is.
pretty
He is the
gray.
older Logan, clearly. And when Logan took him out,
Yeah.
like he was a youngling. But it's
Mhm.
but I the crew's so good. Like he what you call it, gives the characterization of the crew. We only have the crew for like a couple of chapters in this book. Like they're really not gone to very much. And you really get a taste for them, whether it be Thunderhead or the Dogman or Black Dow. Black Dow, come on, man. Like he doesn't even have anything special about him, and he's just horrifying.
Yeah.
Like,
well, Black Dow is just he's the most aggressive of them, you know.
Yeah, but there's one
He's
thing
kind
to
of
say,
the
like,
outlaw type of guy.
yeah, but like I agree with that, Dusty. But like when you say, like, if we were talking about the three of us and we're like the most aggressive, people would be like, because we're none of us very aggressive. So being the most aggressive in this company doesn't take much. But being the most aggressive of those suckers, that's pretty freaking aggressive. When you're more aggressive than Thunderhead, you're more aggressive than flipping Logen Ninefingers. You know, you're blooming aggressive, and I don't know how he did it because he doesn't even say much about him. But my goodness, I think he is the most fearsome in some ways. I'd worry more about him than Logan, even though Logan's like a better fighter. Yeah.
Well, Black Dow's more underhanded, I think, compared to everybody else.
I think he's the one who says, I don't know if it's in this book or in another book, but at one point they have like some tied up captives, and he's like, "Yep, we're gonna need to slit their throats." And he's like, "You need to go away. This isn't for you." It's like, you're rubbish at this stuff. You can kill people if they've got a sword, but this is slow threading of tied up people time. This is me. And you're like, Black Dow, you are just
I do remember that.
But the thing is, like, that's exactly what he should do, right? Like, if you've got your enemy tied up, and you're like, we know everything we need to. The only thing they will ever do if they're released is try and kill me. You should slit their throat. Morally, though, that's just unacceptable. And in most fantasy books, they'd release them. And they'd say,
was Black Dow, was he the one? Because I know when they go to that village that Calder had raided and hung people up in the trees and whatnot.
Yeah.
That's why I say Calder's evil. But anyway,
he is bad.
They get to that raiding party, which is like a couple dudes and a kid. Was it Black Dow that killed the kid?
Yeah. Of course. He's cold, man. Because I know he's like stone cold.
Because they knew they couldn't take the kid with them, and the kid, he participated in that, so they just were gonna kill him. And I understand it. It's kind of messed up that they're killing a kid, but I get it.
Oh, absolutely. And again, it's the point of we can't really use our morality to judge people who are in a completely different moral spectrum. Like, if you're in a kill or be killed world, I think the level of morality that we can enjoy in civilized societies with laws and police forces and all of the stuff that we have in modern society is different. I'm not saying that what is right and wrong changes, but I'm saying what is morally going to be lightly will naturally change. And unless you've lived in that, like, if I don't eat tomorrow, I might die. Unless you've lived that, I don't know if you can fully understand the desperation.
Mm-hmm.
I had one experience in my life where I thought I was suffocating, like actually, like I might not get enough air to live, and I lost control of my body. I was just thrashing around. I like, it's the only time I can think of where I did anything close to a panic attack, and like I just didn't care anymore about anything other than breathing. And that was only for like a few seconds when I'd got to that point where I'm like, I've held my breath as long as I can, I'm gonna die. And I wasn't really gonna die, but in my head, I just
So you
start
turned into the Bloody Nine for like a couple seconds?
the bloody 0.5. Have you seen my arms? I'm like a weed. But I remember like freaking out. And so I wonder, like, if people do get into that position of actually thinking they're going to die, and that's a regular part of everyday life, like it was for these Northmen, where there are no rules other than what the clan chiefs say, and he who has the swords and the axes rules. And you can see by the descriptions that like rape is common. Like if you can force it, you can have it. That theft at axe side or at sword point is common, and that basically it's accepted. It's not wrong because might is right in the North. And if you can get a bigger army, you are king, and that's the way it is. And like that is the Union is well beyond that, well beyond that. But actually, that's one of the things that leaves the Union vulnerable to the Northmen. Is the Union are playing by rules, rules that they're constantly cheating on, rules that they're constantly trying to get around, but they believe in these rules, and it's all about appearances. That's the whole thing with Giselle, it's with West, it's with Glokta, it's all about appearances. And the North, it's like,
there's this
F that.
There's this one important part where Logen enters the city and he sees what the Union has to offer as far as soldiers go. And he's looking, he's like, what are all these people and like these poor people in rags that are barely holding on? He's like, oh, those are our soldiers. He's like, these guys aren't going to last against the North. He's like, don't you got anything better? And then he points to like the officers who are just like these spoiled, like noblemen. And he's just like shaking his head. It's like, he has no idea how this army is going to defeat the North. The North is just all hardened men.
Yeah, and they've all been fighting each other.
years.
That's it. They've all been fighting each other. The reason that they've not already kicked the trash out of the Union is they were so busy fighting each other. And Bethod's done something that the Union thought none of them would ever do. He's managed to win enough that no one else can fight him anymore. So he's got all of them. And you're just like, oh, but they don't have a clue because they're so much more civilized. They're like, we're bound to win. Nope.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that was cool reading this book is you think, so in the next book, I'm going to get Glokta's new appointment to a town that is certainly going to be in trouble because I saw it through Pharaoh's eyes that it's like doomed because of the Gush Empire. And then I've got West, who's going to be in the war in the North, which like they're already like all the hints say that they're going to get bashed big style, and they do not expect to be. So it's going to be awful. And then there's going to be your Voyage of the Dawn Treader, but Abercrombie style to find the seed. And it's like, this is so cool. You've got me a war story, you've got me a political intrigue siege story, and you've got me an often an adventure to find the Holy Grail story. I'm like, great stuff, Abercrombie. I'm with you for book 2.
Yeah.
And then of course he has like great titles, doesn't he? Like Before They Are Hanged and The Blade itself. Should we comment on The Blade itself, like as a title?
Yeah,
like,
sure.
I just want to say that I think Abercrombie's books are some of the most amazingly titled books that I've ever read.
Definitely.
They're just it's so evocative to have something called The Blade itself rather than The Warrior or like the name of the character. And the quote comes from a book I studied at A-level, which is like what we do over here for our last 2 years of high school, is I guess what you'd call it. And in the Odyssey, which was written by Homer, there is a line at the end where it says, "The blade itself incites to deeds of violence." The blade itself incites to deeds of violence. And I think that's just such an amazing idea, so powerful, because like in this book, we have people who have weapons. So Glokta's cleavers, if you like. So it's like having the tools of torture can incite you to become a torturer. Having the ability to put on the Bloody Nine, even if you're desperate to avoid it, can incite you to the violence that portrays. Having the ability to turn people inside out and make them pink mist incites you to use it. If you can do it, at some point you'll want to do it if you think you can do it. And I just think that idea of the blade itself incites to violence is so poignant. It's powerful. It's snappy. It's a great title, and I just think all of his like A Little Hatred and Before They Are Hanged and The Last Argument are just such great titles. I'm just like, I've tried to do titles to books, and like my titles suck. You know, I'm just like,
Best Served Cold. That's my favorite title in the series. It might even be. It's definitely my favorite standalone. It's definitely one of my. It might even be my favorite Joe Abercrombie book, but it's one of them for sure.
I just think that needs a mention because it's not easy to do cool titles and like not have them be just stupid.
Yeah. I've tried that myself many times, and often they just sound stupid.
They do, or cliched. Like my trilogy is like The Chosen of Destiny, the Controllers of Destiny, and the Champions of Destiny, and it's just so cliche. But I've called them that forever, so that it's stuck now, right? I couldn't turn away from those titles if I tried. But the point is, you think I'd love to do something this original, clever, meaningful, and then you realize this is why they pay him the big bucks.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, that's a good point, man. Yeah. Anything else that you wanted to talk about with the first book there, Dusty?
Yeah. The second read through, I enjoyed it so much more than the first read through for some reason. I don't know why. And it's because like a lot of the threads hit me. I was like, wow, yeah, there's this going on and there's that going on. Because a lot of times what happens with me is sometimes during my first read throughs of things, I tend to zone out when it comes to detail overload. And a lot of the things that seem irrelevant to the story, I just like don't really pay too much attention to them.
Yeah.
But when you're done with this series and you go back into it, you figure out that a lot of these little details are really important. Pieces of foreshadowing that tell you what the motivations of some of these characters are. Like the whole bias thing. You can see the bits and pieces there that show you that, this character, there's something going on with this character. I kind of like, of course, I missed most of that the first read through, and when I'm coming through on the second, all the clues are there. I just didn't pay attention to them.
Yeah. I felt the same way in my reread of it. Yeah, for sure.
Like the House of the Maker bit, for example.
For sure.
You can't see that the same now that you know what you know. When you reread it, you're like, oh, now I know all of this. Like the detail of that, because when they go in, it's just like this mysterious place, right? That no one's been in I don't know how long, a long time, like beyond the memory of man, and it's just like, oh. Like, because like just literally being able to go in is like proof that he must be the Grand Magus, and like they go in and they feel like
there's the magic though, the magic barrier too.
Yeah, like if
that
you
they
even look at it,
feel
like
extremely apprehensive from entering it, and that should have been like the biggest clue to Glokta that something is strange going on here, and it's not really a ruse. Because we see all the little pieces of the ruse, like he blew a hole through the wall, and Glokta spends a significant amount of time trying to investigate a practical reason in which he did that, trying to explain it away by non-magical means. And they come to the conclusion that the amount of explosives he would have needed would have been absorbent and cost and extremely difficult to acquire the materials to do that. So It's funny just seeing Glokta grapple with the reality that magic exists.
And it would be really cool, like, to see that in like our world. Like, we have some very, very clever people in our world, extremely clever people, who like dwarf people like me, but don't believe that anything other than what they can prove is real at the moment. But I have the highest respect for these people, and it would be amazing for me to see what would happen if something completely unprovable was suddenly proved. And I wonder how quickly they would adapt, because I think that's what Glokta shows. He shows the idea of like an atheist who meets an angel, right? And he's like, right, doesn't mean I believe in God or anything, but this obviously changes things. There's something here that I didn't yet understand, and how they would adapt to that. They wouldn't just suddenly turn around and say, I'm going to worship on my knees, blah, blah, blah. They'd be like, so what's the actual truth here? Because I know there's things wrong with religion. I've always seen that. So where's the line here? Obviously, there's something going on, and they would attack it from a scientific, maybe, or an inquisitive point of view, rather than just a worshipful one. And I think it could be very interesting to see that. And I think some people have touched on that in some series. But like, I think that's what Glokta does. He's like, there's no such thing as magic. Oh, wait, there is. Now, how am I going to adapt to that? Because he doesn't fall for, well, if he can do magic, he must be the great magus and I must be like in awe of him. He's actually very suspicious, because he's always suspicious. And actually, it's perfect. And that's exactly what we need, because he's so different from the way that Logen or Giselle react. And I think that's cool. I love to think of that idea. Like, if suddenly I met an alien tomorrow, like, didn't just like see one up in the sky, but like one came down, bang, here I am. Should we do tests? Like, how would I react to that? What would be my approach? And when something is proved that you weren't sure of beyond a doubt. And I think that's really, really cool and very interesting to see how Glokta does it. And it's the House of the Maker is like a hint at so much, but pretty much all that actually happens is people feel uncomfortable and they leave with a box.
Yeah, that's true.
That's all that happens. But it just drops so many seeds. And and the cool thing is, an unopened box is a promise, right? It's the Schrodinger's gun. Okay, before the end of this series, that box better get opened, and of course it will be. And so it's a promise by the author. And why does he have Logen carry it? Why is it super heavy even though it's small? And so you're right, Dusty. I think rereading it now would be so different. Maybe I should do that.
Yeah,
man.
Yeah,
if you want the audiobooks, I can get you the hookup for that.
Yeah, I should consider it. My goodness, I'm trying to not buy into Audible, because if I do, I think that'll be the end of my money for the rest of my life.
No. I can just send you I can send you the files. Like, what I do is I check books out from library, and then I send them to Andrew, and then whoever wants them. So if you want, for the next book, I could send you the audiobook. It's a Google Drive. You just click on it and download them.
Yeah, well,
but they're acquired legally from my own library, so that's not like I'm stealing these things.
No, of course not. And I own the books as well. Like, I have. So Joe Abercrombie has some money from me on all points. So but it's good. It's good, because what I normally do is I just have my Kindle read to me in its robotronic voice. It just does
you gotta listen. You gotta listen to this guy narrate. He's great. His Glokta is amazing. You need to experience it. It's really good. Like, I can't explain how good he is.
The thing is that there's more than one way to be an artist, right? Not all artists paint. You could be an artist with your voice, and it sounds like that's what this guy is. Like, he is an actual artist at what he does.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, he's not Scott Brick, if that means anything to you.
It doesn't mean anything to me, but I believe you.
He's a terrible audiobook narrator who coincidentally...
He's very prolific.
Yeah.
So Logan will hire him.
Mm-hmm.
Loads of people hire him. He's extremely prolific, but he sucks. Like,
He's not as
I
he's not
need
as good.
narrators. Yeah, I need narrators that do voices and characters and stuff like that. Scott Brick doesn't do that. Like, all of his characters sound identical.
Yeah.
He's not good.
And like the ones who do the Michael Kramer and Kate Redding, I don't know if
Oh,
you've
yeah.
heard any of theirs. They're very good. They're very good. I think
Michael Kramer does
the Wheel
They
of
do
Time.
Wheel
very
of
good
Time.
noble people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they do but they also did like the Stormlight Archive. They did Shadowversity's book, I know, and they're just really, really good and a great team. A great team. And they're, again, when I think they're not just workers, they're also artists. Like, I know they don't come up with the story, but there's still a way of portraying that is powerful. Just like an actor on a stage didn't write the play, but they can make
I
it
think
so much
that's their
better.
background. That's the background of Kramer and Rating. They were both
On
in
the stage.
theater, so that's
Okay.
why they're so good at it.
Yeah, well, I
Okay.
think, but even like James Marsters, I don't know if you've listened to the Dresden File one.
Dresden Files, yeah.
I haven't listened to it, but I have friends who have, and obviously he's just like over here in England, he's very popular. We like him, and
He's a great narrator of the Dresden Files books.
and that's what they
Fucking
say.
awesome, man.
He says if someone else did it now after me listening to him for so long, it would just sound wrong. He's like, I'm like his
That
voices.
happens.
Like, or just the
That
way
happens.
I listen to the Dresden Files. So he's like, even if I'm just reading the book to myself, he's like, I hear the voices in his tongue.
Yeah, I find that when I read like like ebooks or something like that of Dresden Files books, that the characters sound like James Marsden's voice.
Well, that's what happens when I read The Wheel of Time.
Yeah.
I hear Kate Redding and Michael Kramer.
That is cool. And I think that in a way that's the greatest of success, right? When you've portrayed things so well, it has become indelibly accepted by the fandom.
Yeah, definitely.
So highlight of the book?
Oh, well,
the battle, the Bloody
definitely.
Nine, basically.
The Bloody Nine Berserk mode. Yep, that's the highlight for me. And like all like just because it's character driven, how great the characters are, especially Logen Ninefingers and Glokta to me.
That's sensational.
Yeah, the Bloody Nine personality is so different from regular Logan.
Yeah,
it's like, wow.
Constantly trying to avoid fighting. The Bloody Nine is not trying to avoid anything.
Exactly. No.
Yeah. I really like the contest. I like that whole plot line of the build up to it, the way he makes it feel like a sporting event. I just think that's really cool. I'm like, you can't make me think of this like the Super Bowl, and he does. He makes me think of like the Super Bowl. I'm like, well, who's gonna win? As if it really matters. It feels like it really matters, and then does it when you're actually thinking about like people dying? Probably not, but like
no,
like it does at the time.
Well, I guess Column West kind of tells Giselle how it's important because it elevated his status from because he won that contest, he's able to serve as an officer in the army.
Yeah.
So he kind of tries to instill the honor of winning that. And then because he gets made fun of, and I think Glokta said, "Oh, you're just a quitter," and I think he had the thoughts where he was going to quit because he had enough of it, and then Glokta chewed him out and made him feel like an idiot, and called him like a weak loser, and he's like, "I'm going to show everybody now."
But he's still going to quit until what's her name pulls her little maneuver, RD, because in the end, a lot of it goes back to the guy's pants. And,
that's true.
And she mocks him as well. And I guess after like Glokta, this cripple I don't care about, and then this girl who I'm so hot for, and they're both just like screaming. He's like, right, frickin', I'll show you all. I'll just go and die on the flipping field. And he's like, he's off to do it. And it shows what Giselle at this point is motivated by, which is pride, right? Pride.
Mhm.
He stung my pride. And Glokta understands that will work on him. But it's I love the fact he gets trained by this old like guy who I thought was going to be his mentor, and in a way, West, who is his buddy, is a better mentor, and in a way, Glokta, who mocks him ruthlessly, is actually a better mentor as well. And the thing is, it made me think of my own life, which again is it's been very easy, but some of the people who have caused me trouble in my life have proven to end up being good mentors, because learning to deal with that and not overreact has actually turned me into who I am today. And now I'm someone
Yeah.
who it's extremely hard to make me truly angry. I don't think I think I can honestly say I don't think there's a single person on the planet that I hate anymore. That is just gone from my personality. I don't I typically don't feel fear. Like I'm not put in situations where I need to, but like I don't worry about the future at all. And things like that is just and I know I would if I hadn't gone through feeling fear frequently and learning to overcome that and learning to be okay with being flawed and being a fool. When you are no longer afraid of people thinking you a fool, my goodness, it's so much easier to talk, so much easier to
Certainly.
enjoy your life. And
Yeah.
so in many ways, I think my Gloktas, who probably were crippled themselves, set me free from a lot of my own insecurities. And I think that's one of the reasons I love the Giselle storyline, because I do have it easy, and I recognize that. And I've always had it pretty easy compared to some of the people I've met in my life. But I see a lot of experiences that Giselle has that teach me. Like I was very late to having experiences with girls, and was really worried and easily manipulated by any girl who would show me any interest because I'd had so little interest. And you think, I can see why Giselle would go for that. I can see why he was so desperate to impress. And then the fact that that goes wrong actually helps Giselle for his future and how he approaches very complicated relationships in the future. So I really like the Giselle relationship, and I like even the way he wins, because he like shouldn't win, but does win. And
Yeah.
and then what does that cause, right? What does that cause? And later on, we'll see that trope of Giselle shouldn't be the hero, and he shouldn't win, and he shouldn't do this, and yet he does, and nothing is within his power. It always seems to be done without him or despite him, and yet in the end, he ends up holding key cards to decide the fate of arguably the entire union.
Yeah.
So I find that very interesting, because I often feel like I'm not a driver. I don't do anything. I'm not very ambitious. I'm nobody's leader. I'm just a guy. And I'm very obedient. Like I'm not very like one of those people like who thinks, should we be listening to our leaders? I'm just like, yeah, they want me to do it, I'll do it. I'm a follower, not a leader. And I think in many ways Giselle is, but he is forced by circumstance, that even though he is just driven by, in this case, Baez, right? Baez is pulling all the strings, or Glokta is. He's not even a chess player. He's just a piece. But in the end, how he chooses to react to being manipulated is, I find, very, very interesting. Like how he reacts to becoming the champion is, I think, very interesting. Not what you would have expected from spoiled rich kid at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
Well
totally
said,
thought
man.
he was going to get RD, and he totally didn't. Trope flipper Abercrombie, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that guy flips tropes like pancakes on a bad day.
Well, they have an interesting moment in the second book, which I guess we'll talk about. But
well, I hope so.
And it's a very realistic and interesting moment that happens. But we'll talk about that because it's in the second book.
We will.
Sounds good, man. All right. Well, I think we've pretty much talked about all the, or at least most of the great and interesting stuff in the book. So I guess we can end it here, and I'm sure we will talk about the next one, book 2, Last arc, or wait, no, that's book 3.
Before they are hanged.
Before they are hanged, yes, is book 2. So yeah, let's talk about that next time in maybe about like 3 weeks to a month as usual, I would say, if that sounds good to you guys.
Yeah, it sounds good to me.
Cool.
I'm all over that.
All right. Well, I will say all this stuff that I like to say at the end of my videos here, and then you guys can give any last words or plugs or anything there. So thanks again to everyone for watching. Hope you found our conversation about this awesome book as interesting as I'm sure we did. And definitely check out The Blade itself and the whole First Law trilogy if they interest you. And if you like grimdark fantasy or any kind of fantasy, I'm sure you will. And read the next one before they're hanged, and then join us to talk about it next time. And like I always say, thanks to those of you who subscribe to my channel, click the like button on the video, share this everywhere, tell everyone about it, and especially thanks to those of you who give me money on Patreon, which I greatly appreciate. And I'll put the link for my Patreon page in the description of this video, as I always do. And as I always say, I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And when that darkness feels like it crushes you down, go into your bloody 9 mode and become a badass and just kill everyone. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all, and groove is in the heart. And read the First Law trilogy and Joe Abercrombie's books, and because he is Lord Grimdark. All right. So, anything else you guys want to say before we end it there?
Dusty.
I just say I will apologize to everybody about yesterday's stream, which was silence for 3 hours. If you guys were looking forward to the Logen conversation, next time me and Andrew meet, we're just going to have a short little 30-minute conversation about the movie instead of our deep dive, because I don't think we can stomach doing another 2-hour podcast about Logen again. But we will talk about it a little bit, probably more about our last thoughts, which were pretty awesome.
Yeah, they were.
Concerning that particular movie. But yeah, just sorry about that. It's our fault. We didn't do a sound check like we usually do. And the time we don't do a sound check is the time that there's no sound at all. So we had probably the worst luck, because it seems like every time we do a sound check, it's mostly fine, right?
Yeah.
So it's the one time. All right. So yeah, next week we're going to talk about Logen just for about 30 minutes. And then we're going to talk about True or False, which is a book about the history of fake news.
And I just like to say, if you're interested, the key thing about the book for me is if you like reversals and tropes being subverted, this is the book for you. If you like amazing and deep character work, this is definitely the book for you. But you need to be into a bit of violence, or at least capable of enjoying or appreciating well described, not just for the sake of it, violence, because the book is no holds barred on violence. That's why it's called The Blade itself. The Blade itself, this book, incites to violence. And so you got to be up for that if you're going to read it. It is no holds barred. There's going to be sex, there's going to be killing, and there's going to be some really nasty people that you're going to feel sympathetic towards. And so that is not your kettle of fish. Don't read it. But otherwise, it is one of the best fantasy books I've ever read. And I believe that it is one of the hardest series to predict. It is the most trope-defying thing I've personally read.
I agree. That is very trope-defying.
Well said. Yep, Joe Abercrombie is Lord Grimdark. He does it the best. And don't read it if your version of violence is vampires? You mean those like vegan vampires in Twilight? No, that's not that. This is this isn't for you if your version of violence is whatever's in Twilight.
And that's fine. You know, there's books for all kinds. book that you actually like.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Anyway, so check out the blade itself, and before they're hanged, before we read it next time, and then join us next time. And thanks again, everyone, for watching. And thanks again, you guys, Tristram and Dusty. Always fun to talk to you guys. And adios until next time, everyone.
Bye, guys.